Once upon a time, in a quiet little village nestled among rolling green hills, lived a kind shoemaker. His name was Thomas, and he shared his cozy home with his dear wife, Margaret. They were humble souls, known throughout the village for their kindness and honest hearts. Thomas was a master of his craft, famous for creating the most beautiful and comfortable shoes anyone had ever seen. Even with such skill and good hearts, their pockets were often quite empty. One chilly evening, Thomas looked at the last small piece of leather he had left. He knew it was just enough to make one final pair of shoes. He sighed to Margaret. "My dear, this is all we have. There is no more leather and no money to buy any." Their hearts were heavy with worry, wondering what tomorrow would bring. As darkness fell, a peaceful stillness settled over their little home. Thomas carefully laid out the last piece of leather on his workbench. The gentle moonlight streamed through the window, casting a soft glow on the leather. It seemed to whisper of hope, even in their quiet despair. Little did Thomas and Margaret know, a wonderful secret was about to unfold. Magic, tiny and bright, was just around the corner, ready to tiptoe into their lives. Suddenly, two small, cheerful elves, Eli and Nora, silently entered through the window. They were dressed in tiny forest clothes, with pointed ears and tiny tools. Their eyes sparkled with kindness, and they looked friendly and cute. They moved with such grace, like little whispers in the night. Eli and Nora began their work with nimble fingers and joyful hearts. They expertly sewed, cut, and polished the leather with incredible speed. The shoes took shape as if by magic, becoming more beautiful with every stitch. They worked tirelessly, their tiny tools making the softest sounds in the quiet room. The next morning, Thomas and Margaret awoke to a wonderful surprise. There, on the workbench, sat a pair of the most beautifully crafted shoes they had ever seen. They were perfect in every way, shining as if touched by starlight. Thomas and Margaret gasped, their hearts filling with wonder and a little bit of mystery. The magic continued night after night. Each morning, new and more elegant shoes appeared on the workbench. Thomas and Margaret's business slowly improved and began to flourish. Soon, their little shop was filled with happy customers, all admiring the exquisite footwear. Margaret, filled with curiosity, couldn't contain her wonder any longer. "Thomas," she whispered one evening, "we must discover who our kind helpers are." Thomas agreed, his own heart eager to know the secret of their good fortune. They decided to stay awake that night and watch. That night, Thomas and Margaret hid behind a curtain, barely daring to breathe. As the moon climbed high, Eli and Nora tiptoed in through the window. They watched in silent amazement as the tiny elves joyfully worked on the shoes. Their hearts swelled with gratitude for these unseen friends. The next day, Thomas and Margaret decided to give back, filled with gratitude for the elves' kindness. Margaret carefully sewed tiny shirts and trousers, while Thomas crafted the smallest, most perfect shoes. They worked with love, imagining the joy these gifts would bring. They left the tiny clothes and shoes out on the workbench for their magical helpers. On the final night, Eli and Nora found their gifts and danced happily around the workbench. They tried on their new clothes, their faces beaming with delight. With a final wave, the elves departed through the window, never to be seen again. They left behind a feeling of warmth and a memory of magic. Thomas and Margaret's shop continued to flourish, and they lived happily ever after. They were forever grateful for the magic that had touched their lives. In their shop, they kept a small painting of two tiny, cheerful figures, always remembering the kind elves who helped them in their time of need. And so, their story became a gentle reminder that kindness, even in the smallest forms, can bring the greatest joy. Love sharing magical moments with your child? Subscribe to Wonder Why Tales, where every story sparks imagination, kindness.